to our college football playoff ranking show here on the Locked On Podcast Network. The final college football playoff rankings are coming down. And of course, the holiday season is here. I want to remind you guys, stock up on all your favorites at Omaha Steaks and take advantage of that 50% off site-wide by shopping the Friends and Family Sale. Go to omahasteaks.com, use the promo code Locked On, and check out to get $30 off your order. Minimum order may be required. And we got the promo code right down there by Josh's head the whole show. So let's welcome in our panel, Daniel Monroe, host of Locked On Bulldogs, covering Georgia, Josh Neighbors, host of Locked On Big 12, covering the TCU angle, and Jay Stevens, host of Locked On Buckeyes. I'm Chris Gordy, host of Locked On SEC. And guys, who is going to be, we don't have Michigan representation here, but we feel like we got every angle covered unless we get a surprise. So Daniel, we'll start with you. Georgia Bulldogs look pretty strong in their dismantling of LSU, and we know they're in. We know they're number one. But thoughts on how Georgia looked, and then two-part, should Alabama be in?
Yeah, Gordy, I'm excited to be here. I have to admit I'm a little disappointed. I know you have a lot of pull. I thought maybe we would get Nick Saban on here lobbying, begging the committee to let him in. I know he's been on every other media outlet in the known world trying to do that, but I guess we couldn't get that pull. But we were happy with what we saw in Georgia. I think they had messed around for the last couple weeks and maybe shown some weaknesses, but looked strong in LSU, gave up a few points, but looked pretty convincing in the win. So excited to see. I think Georgia fans are excited to see who we're about to play. That's the big news that we're waiting for is who's going to end up at 4.
And the second part, in your opinion, and look, I'm an SEC guy, you're an SEC guy. Should Alabama be in?
No, TCU should be in over Alabama. I mean, I don't know. LSU is going to end up ranked, 20 final. So you lost to the number 20 team in the country, a team that another college football playoff team just blew out on a neutral site. I don't know. Death Valley is probably not worth 19 points, in my opinion. TCU lost one game in overtime to a team that's better, that's going to be ranked just as high as any team that beat Alabama this year. Alabama, we wouldn't be having this conversation if it were any other team. Team. I personally would love to play Alabama in the SEC championship game as a Georgia fan. I would rather play Alabama than TCU, and that is absolutely not any rhetoric or anything like that. I think this Alabama team is severely flawed, and they've shown that this year. And so, no, I don't think they'll get in. I don't think they should get in. But as the number 1 seed, I would love it if they did get in, because that would mean we would get to play them.
Let's go to Jay, host of Locked On Buckeyes. Nobody happier this weekend than Jay Stevens. I'm sure you were a big Utah fan on Friday night and probably a big Kansas State fan on Saturday. Both USC and TCU lose, so we know it's going to open the door. It looks like USC is going to fall out of this and opens the door now for Ohio State to slide in as one of the best one-loss teams. But just your reaction in watching that.
Chaos is what I was rooting for this weekend. On Friday night, I was watching the game, and then on Saturday, in the second half and into overtime, there was a thriller and there was excitement, and all the gashes on Max Duggan's arm were kind of making me anxious, wondering if they were going to win the game or lose the game. And the chaos is what I was wanting, what I was hoping for, and we got it. The Buckeyes are in a weird spot. They're in a luxurious, because I think in any other, most years of college football, you lose in rivalry weekend, you're not going to be in the playoff. But because of the way they played previously earlier in the year and the way that conference championship weekend went, it kind of fell in their lap that they are probably going to be in the playoff this year. USC had a good year, but the 2 losses and losing to the same team twice, it's not a good look. Not a good look at all. But the Buckeyes are very fortunate to be where they are right now at this point in the season.
Yeah, and look, there's some people who've argued, an embarrassing loss at home to Michigan. Maybe Ohio State hasn't done enough to prove it. But again, this is becoming a numbers game, guys. 1 loss is better than 2 losses in a lot of these cases. And so really become a numbers game. Let's get to Josh, host of Locked On Big 12. I'm sure you're going to stump more than anything for TCU. I'll just share my opinion real quick, watching how they battled, watching Max Duggan stay in. And coming up inches short in overtime. As soon as it went to overtime, I said, look, TCU's in. They've battled hard and all that, but make the case for why TCU should be in as either number 3 or number 4.
Yeah, I mean, they're in. I think it's just a matter of where they fall, right? They still can say they've beaten everybody on their schedule. And, yesterday it came down to like last year's Big 12 title did inches, right? I mean, probably want to run Max Duggan there twice into the end zone. They didn't do it. They went with Kendra Miller instead. Didn't get it. K-State kicks a field goal, but you lose by 3 in OT, right? You're going to be in pretty good shape most likely. And I think it's a case of actually just now, like, where are they in relation to Ohio State, right? In my opinion, they should be ahead of Ohio State. I mean, if you're talking about, hey, who's last, who had the last loss, TCU's comes later, but it's because it was a conference title game. It was the extra game. If they were to move TCU behind Ohio State, they're functionally treating last weekend like a bye, right? Like they're treating this like it was a bye week for Ohio State and they jump ahead, as opposed to TCU earned a conference championship game, which they lost narrowly. So if you were to jump Ohio State over them, you'd be saying, Ohio State got to take the week off after getting dog walked at home and missing a conference title game and getting in. So I think TCU at 3 is the right spot, and Ohio State probably falls at number 4 there. But yeah, I mean, the Frogs showed, a lot of their weaknesses and finally got kind of caught there in close games.
Yeah, and our chat function is live too. So anybody on YouTube or wherever you're watching this, you can throw up a chat, throw up a comment, and we'll throw it in there for our guys. Real quick before we go back to Daniel, Josh, Nick Saban hopping on Fox yesterday. I'm sure he's going to be on Sports Center and all this, but like making the case, look, go ask the Vegas odds makers. They're the most impartial people out there. They would have us favored in a neutral field game against Ohio State and TCU. It's a case you can't argue, right? I mean, Alabama is still always going to get the benefit of the doubt because they're always one of the most talented teams. But what'd you think of Saban hopping up there and making that argument?
Like the idea, it's like, well, Vegas would have us as a favorite. Yeah, I mean, TCU was dogs in a couple of their games. TCU 7.5-point underdog against Texas, right? What happened in that game? TCU defensive domination of a Texas team that had a lot of really good offensive performances this year. So you can't play the Vegas odds numbers. That's not how this stuff works. Alabama, and this is proven through any sport. Like, look at the Packers spreads right now. Look at any Tampa Bay Buccaneers spread. Those spreads are not as big as they should be because of a certain guy playing quarterback, because of the brand, because of a certain player, whatever it is. Alabama's cachet a lot of times helps set lines places that they probably shouldn't be. I think I saw it like last 12. It was something like 6-6 ATS for Alabama. So, that spread number, it's not a great argument. It's just it's not where you want to kind of put your eggs in the basket of, well, we would be favored. Yeah, but what happened when the games were actually played? You lost 2 of them. You nearly lost a couple more of them, and so you can't go that direction. It's just not a logical argument.
2 important numbers. Alabama was, I think, a 9-point road favorite in Knoxville against Tennessee and a 13.5-point road favorite in Baton Rouge against LSU. Lost both those games. So again, were they close losses? If Will Riker makes that field goal, they beat Tennessee, lose as time expires on a game-winning field goal to Tennessee, and then LSU, go to overtime and LSU decides to go for 2 and they win on a 2-point conversion. So close losses. I mean, but again, the two losses still is what hurts Alabama most.
It's not even those games, Chris. Josh, your point is absolutely right. Nick Saban's not an idiot. He's going to argue the point that makes his team look good. That just happens to be the only one that's favorable for his team. The relevant spread is that Alabama was a 20-plus point favorite going into Texas for that game, a game which they won by 1 point, a common opponent that they share with TCU, a game which TCU absolutely dominated, and Alabama needed a backup quarterback and a missed field goal to win, and a made field goal at the buzzer to win that game. And so, yeah, I think Nick Saban, it's not a great look for the greatest football coach of all time to be out here lobbying, but that's where we are.
Well, let's also talk repercussions for Alabama. If they make the playoff, guess who's going to play? Reigning Heisman Trophy winner Bryce Young, Will Anderson, who projects to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. If they go to the Sugar Bowl, I think both those guys are opting out. They're looking at us going, we're going to go prepare for the draft. And you're starting Jalen Milroe against probably a hungry Kansas State team that's going to play it like it's the Super Bowl. They want to beat Alabama for brand recognition, all that. So it is a big dynamic flip if Alabama makes it into the playoff. But Jay, let me jump to you real quick. Ohio State, like we said, we think they're in, but make the case for why they should be either ahead or behind TCU at 3 or 4.
their season this year, they had an interesting look, and they just dominated basically everybody. I get one loss. I get the way that it looked, but I'm going to do something that I think most people will not like. I say all the time, when you lose matters in college football. Josh Neighbors, I think, was on here last time I talked about this, and he made the same reason. But Buckeye fans are going to be talking about the week TCU lost matters. They don't care that it was conference championship weekend. It's literally when they lost, and when you lose, you should fall in the poll. Even if it's one spot, you should fall in said poll. And where you're right now about to find out where TCU is going to fall in Ohio State, many people are going to say, well, TCU lost. Let's jump them because of when they lost. It's a weird numbers game. It's a weird how people view this stuff. But I do think there are people in that committee room that will say, TCU lost. We don't care about the 13th game. Let's put Ohio State over them. Also, I'm going to throw something out there that people will say is weird. I partly think it's weird, but ratings matter. And you want a rematch of Ohio State and Michigan in the playoff for ratings purposes. Honestly, for me, my personal opinion, I don't think that should hold weight in the committee room, but this is a moneymaker. And I understand how these things are viewed by people in the committee room, by TV networks, everybody, ESPN, not going to say TV networks. It's an ESPN thing. I understand how this thing is going to go, and they desperately want a rematch of the game between Ohio State and Michigan on New Year's Eve. That's probably what they want. Do they have an influence in that? Probably. But when you lose matters, and that it could hurt TCU.
I just like to respond by saying, like, you have to factor in, though, the ultimate other side of that is Ohio State didn't have a chance to lose because of how bad they lost previously, right? I mean, not how bad. I mean, if they just lost, they wouldn't have a chance, right? If it was a 2-point loss, they still wouldn't have gone. But they lost by 20-plus points at home. And I know, once again, Michigan's a really good football team.
Yes.
And when you lose does matter. But I think it's interesting to frame it like this. Let's just say Tennessee hadn't lost South Carolina, right? What we'll be doing is we'd be debating right now TCU versus Ohio State, right? We'd pretty much be assuming that Tennessee at 11-1 is in there. If we were doing that, I feel very confident in saying TCU would be in, and there probably wouldn't be much debate. But now we're talking about seeding. It seems like the Ohio State could creep above them argument is there. So if we were talking about this same conversation for a spot, there would be a ton of outrage if Ohio State had made it over them. In that situation. I think in this one, there would be less outrage because it's just for seeding, but I still think the same conversation should apply in this situation. TCU should be over them because they had an opportunity to win a title that Ohio State squandered against a very good team in the final week of the season.
It's interesting. And again, I think Jay makes some really good points about, Michigan, Ohio State in a national championship would bring a lot of big eyeballs. Only problem with that argument, I'll go back to Daniel, I think Georgia's going to be in the national championship. So what do you make of it? We'll see here the matchup we get. But as a Georgia fan who just saw LSU's backup quarterback come in and throw for like 250 yards, are you more afraid of TCU or are you more afraid of Ohio State? Who in your mind would be the more favorable matchup right now?
Yeah, I mean, 500 yards passing for LSU in the game. I mean, just absolutely. Georgia hadn't seen numbers like that in a long time. So I might be in the minority here. And we're going to talk about this on the show this week, but I would rather play Ohio State than TCU as a Georgia fan. I know they're more talented. I know that they have more 5-stars. I know that, they've got a Heisman Trophy, favorite at quarterback, and they've got, Travion Henderson will probably be back for the by New Year's Eve. But to me, the way that you beat Georgia is with the deep ball. I think you throw it down the field and you push the corners and safeties down the sidelines. I think that's how we've seen teams have success against Georgia. That's why people thought Tennessee was going to be able to play with Georgia, but Georgia was able to take that away. I think TCU does that better than Ohio State. I think TCU's big, talented wide receivers and Max Duggan's ability to push the ball down the field on deep play action shots makes me more nervous as a Georgia fan. So to be honest, I would rather play Ohio State, even though they're the more talented team. The spread, Josh, to your point, the spread wouldn't be as big in the Georgia-Ohio State matchup. Vegas would like Ohio State a little bit more. but I would rather play them just because I think the style of play lends itself more towards something that Georgia can stop versus if TCU hits some of those deep shots and Keely Ringo got exposed a little bit in the SEC championship game against LSU. If TCU is able to do that, I think that's where Georgia could run into some problems.
Jay, let me jump to you real quick on what you saw out of this Michigan team, because it is interesting if we end up, if we do get a Georgia-Michigan rematch in the national championship. We saw that game played out in the first round of last year's playoff, but this Michigan team seems to do a lot of the little things better than last year's Michigan team.
That game last night, I was expecting Jeff Brom of Purdue to throw everything, the kitchen sink at Michigan, because that was the only shot they had of winning that game. In the moment, I'm discussing and thinking about how the talent gap is so large. But when you have a freshman corner who is playing so well, like number 2 did for Michigan, forget his name at the moment, and you're getting your backup running back who goes for, I think, $160 on the ground, you're having the offensive line move people consistently, and by the fourth quarter, the offensive line of Michigan kind of wore down Purdue. It was just a weird kind of fun game to watch, to see, Michigan's going to do things in the second half. They're a well-coached team. They're extremely disciplined. But to see it on display, not just a week ago in the biggest game of the year, but also for a trophy to say you're going to win back-to-back conference championships for the first time that there has been a conference championship game in the Big Ten, that means something. And I do believe Jim Harbaugh has done a phenomenal job of hiring the right coaches, bringing in the right type of players. And the players believe in Jim Harbaugh and what he is preaching every single day. There's a belief, I do believe, inside that Michigan locker room that no matter who they step on the field with, no matter if it's Georgia, a rematch with Ohio State, a TCU, I don't think anybody else is going to actually be in the playoff. I think those are the 4 schools that will be in. I think Michigan's very, very confident that what they bring to the table, even without Blake Corn, who is out for the year, they can beat anybody that's on the field with them. And there's a different dynamic with J.J. McCarthy as quarterback. Early in the year, I thought it should have been Cade McNamara, but they are doing different things, and there's a confidence and a belief in QB1 in Ann Arbor, and it's been on full display all year. It was on full display as the competition got better against Penn State, against Ohio State, against Illinois, who's a good football team, not so much in the Penn State-Ohio State argument, but also against Purdue in a Big Ten championship. J.J. McCarthy made plays, not so much the Penn State game, that was more on the ground, but he's making plays with his arm and with his legs to move the ball consistently down the field. This team, it's weird saying this, but the Wolverines can have an opportunity to be scary or dangerous in the college football playoff.
I just wanted to make Jay say really nice things about Michigan there. So,
hey, go ahead. Just X this part out. Act like I didn't say that at all. Just forget it.
We're waiting on ESPN, of course, as they do everything, drawing it out. Let's slow play this thing. I already checked in every city of all the potential top teams. We're just waiting on the play.
They also have the table, Chris, where the shot is of the back of I believe David Pollock's head. They've turned around now, and here we go. So, but the back of David Pollock's head, the back of Jesse Palmer's head, which was very weird.
Yeah. So as soon as they start revealing the team, we're going to reveal them for you right here, and we'll debate it. But it is interesting. I just saw somebody commented and said the committee wants to see an Ohio State Michigan rematch. That's not a guarantee in the second round. So would you be more inclined, if you're on this playoff committee, Josh, to put Ohio State number 3, to make sure you get that rematch?
Yeah, but at that point, if we're doing that, just put Alabama in too for the ratings, right? If we're going to go for the TCU shouldn't play football at that point, right, Chris? I know it's being hyperbolic, but come on now. If we're going to do that for television ratings, I know part of it is you can do that at some points, but when the case is clear cut like this, you need to kind of go where the ratings or go where the metrics show you, as opposed to the actual television ratings.
Well, look, I mean, when everything has the words AT&T and all the sponsors, those people are paying top dollar, and they want to, they want the most eyeballs, and you would have monster eyeballs on an Ohio State Michigan playoff game. Georgia TCU, I think, would be fine, but I think you would get way more on that one. So we're going to see. They are getting ready to reveal here the playoff spots, and again, they're going to slow play this to reveal the top 6 here slowly. And of course, Georgia coming in at number 1. And you may be ahead of me, Josh, so I'm just going on my TV here. Georgia is number 1 at 13-0. No surprise there, Daniel. The Bulldogs with the best, back-to-back undefeated regular seasons, but finally Kirby Smart gets his second SEC championship in his tenure there. So good to see there. And as Josh just said, number 2 will be Michigan here. So again, no surprise there. Those are the 2 teams that were 1 and 2. They both took care of business on conference championship weekend, and they're 1 and 2. So we'll see how they'll reveal 5 and 6 here in just a second. Okay, so you just threw it out there, Josh. TCU's coming in at number 3.
Yep.
All right. Well, there we go. TCU is number 3. So it will be TCU versus Michigan, which again, not what we were just saying a second ago that the TV people might want that, but I'm sure they'll keep us in suspense here on who will be the number 4 team. So as soon as you get that, Josh, go ahead and let us know. But Josh, let me throw it to you real quick. Michigan, TCU should be a good one, right?
You hope so. The Frogs may have to go a little bit away from the 3-3-5. Not sure the 3 down lineman's gonna do too much against the Michigan rushing attack. Might have to commit more guys. And look, it's a fun, exciting challenge for Joe Gillespie. It's a different kind of rushing attack, in my opinion, what they've just faced against Kansas State and Deuce Vaughn, and a really awesome game. So it's a really interesting game, but TCU's got a chance to do some things in the passing game. They're pretty exciting. The one thing for them, though, is they're going to have to run the ball against a really good rushing defense in Michigan. That is going to be their challenge because Kendre Miller in the running game, it's a huge part of how they establish, like we talked about earlier, that play action pass. So they're going to have to rush the ball effectively if they want a good chance of beating Michigan. Because I think that defense for Michigan right now, like we saw against Ohio State, it's the heartbeat for them. That's what's getting the job done, allowing the offense to run the football. And then J.J. McCarthy, like we saw last night, to be pretty effective and made some plays on the move too.
I want to take this second real quick to remind you guys our show is presented by our friends at Omaha Steaks, and the holidays are here. So if you're thinking about trying to decide what to get friends, family, whoever for gifts for the holiday season, there's nothing better than Omaha Steaks. I just got my box in a couple weeks ago. We've been firing it up every weekend, firing up the grill. We have the steaks, we have the burgers. We're going to do the chicken this coming week. And go to omahasteaks.com right now. You can use our promo code LOCKEDON at checkout. It is a gift from the heart, a gift that will be remembered. With every unforgettable bite, you can order with complete confidence, knowing you're ordering the very best. omahasteaks.com. Use promo code LOCKEDON at checkout to get that extra $30 off your order. Minimum order may be required. It's the world's best beef over at Omaha Steaks. All right, we are waiting to see here. And Josh, go ahead and reveal who our number 4 team is.
Jay, congratulations. The Ohio State Buckeyes are going to be number 4 and set up. And also, I mentioned this too. Ohio State versus Georgia, Michigan versus TCU. Like from a betting perspective, going back to what Nick Saban said, the 2 most compelling matchups I think you can make from that perspective, betting wise too. It's pretty interesting to see how they handicap those.
Yeah, pretty interesting that they basically gave TCU a wash yesterday. And this is interesting from a standpoint of we've seen one-loss Big 12 champs get dinged before, that they basically said, TCU, as soon as you went to overtime, we didn't care. It was a wash. We're not moving you down. We're not moving you up. That's that. But let's get into it since we know what the game will be. Let's go back to Daniel. Early thoughts on this Georgia-Ohio State first-round playoff matchup.
Yeah, I'm going to be getting a lot of people on Twitter messaging me because you baited me into saying that I wanted to play Ohio State. And now we're going to play Ohio State. And so, God forbid we lose that game. I'm never going to hear the end of it. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a tough matchup for the Bulldogs. This is if you go by composite ratings and talent ratings and Vegas metrics and all those things that we just got finished saying don't really matter. Ohio State's the most talented team other than Georgia that's in this playoff. They are probably the Vegas' second favorite team that's in the playoff. And so, and it's the team, I think it's an intriguing matchup from the angle that, Georgia over this run has obviously had their games against Alabama. They've gone toe to toe with Nick Saban, lost to him and beaten him finally last year. And they played Oklahoma in 2017, and they played Michigan last year in the semifinal game. Ohio State and Ryan Day is kind of the team that Kirby has not really matched up against of the of the traditional powers that have been at the top of college football. And so I think it's an exciting matchup for Georgia fans. I think it's an exciting matchup for Ohio State fans. I think this is what you want. It's supposed to be the playoff, right? Like, this is what you want. You want good teams playing each other, and you want to see which team is better. And so I think the game's going to be in Atlanta, and that's going to be nice for Georgia, as it should be, as the number 1 seed. But Ohio State's going to have a lot of fans there, and Ohio State's going to have a talented team. I'd be interested to hear what Jay thinks in terms of like health and players back. And, you know, do we see Smith and Jigba in this game? Do we see Henderson come back? Like I said earlier, I think it's a long time to rest. And if Ohio State gets healthy, then they could be very good.
Before we jump to Jay, let me just ask you, Daniel, because Georgia had a couple of people banged up in the SEC championship. We saw Warren McClendon. We saw Ladd McConkey. Any thoughts, any words on any of those guys, and if anybody will miss any significant time there?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. McClendon, I think Kirby indicated after the game. Kirby's never going to give you any information, but he indicated after the game that McClendon wasn't too bad. McConkey, he indicated, was not necessarily a new injury, but just sort of an aggravation. And the way he walked off the field gives me a little bit of hope there. But actually, I think Georgia's as healthy as they've been all year. A.D. Mitchell back in that game. And so A.D. Mitchell's the best wide receiver for Georgia by a lot. And he's missed the last 6-7 weeks with a leg injury. He was back in that game and looked good. Jalen Carter is as healthy as he's been all year. So I actually think, had those two men that you mentioned in the championship game, but Georgia might be as healthy as they've been all year leading up to this game. And so I think from that standpoint, they're in a pretty good spot.
Let's get to Jay. Jay, thoughts on the matchup, and like Daniel said, how healthy will the Buckeyes be?
I'm really happy to simply be in, because I think this year in college football has been weird with the way the teams have gone. But just being in's a luxury, but you have to bring your A game. I understand 2022 should not have a bearing. 2021 should have a bearing, or it should view how you look at 2022. But Georgia won the Natty last year. Like, that means something. They are the defending national champions, number 1 team in the country, and they have a shot to repeat as national champions. Ohio State needs to come into this game with a better mindset, a different mindset, and with a fire and a look in their eye that shows they understand what's right in front of them. They understand the opportunity and actually go out and play football. Ohio State Buckeye football for 4 quarters. In regards to the injury situation, I'm not the biggest Travion Henderson fan. I'm going to say that now. People on Locked On Buckeye say that all the time. Daniel, maybe you and I could do that, talk about this off air, maybe here. I don't care. But he has had his own issues. I had a show earlier where I said he should not be the starting running back at Ohio State. But I do believe him and Mayan Williams, 2 guys that have been banged up throughout this year, that 1-2 punch, and I don't care who starts in that. I do think Mayan's a better running back. But I do think those 2 guys together, all on the field every now and then, they provide a great duo for Ohio State in the backfield. For Smith and Jigba, I do believe if this was a New Year's Six Bowl, he would not play. I actually talked earlier, because I didn't really think the Buckeyes are going to be doing this, that he would not play again for the Buckeyes. But something tells me November 31st, 8 p.m. Eastern in Atlanta, and Jigba plays for the first time since the Iowa game. And I don't really – I know it's an asset, but I really wonder how it's going to affect the other receivers at Ohio State that have been playing all year long. The defense, to me, is going to be an interesting conversation and look, because they struggle with tackling in the secondary. Secondary's been a little bit of a liability. I wonder how that's going to be. You have a month to prepare for this game. You got to bring your A game. You can't show up like you did against Michigan. You cannot do that again, because you're going to be out on the outside looking in a potential rematch of the Wolverines in the national championship for a trophy. Won't happen if you show up against Georgia like you did against Michigan. So the health is going to be great. There's been some guys banged up on the O-line, also on defense as well. If everybody's healthy, this is going to be one of the best games you've seen all year long. It should be. I will say should be. Not will be. I'll say should be. I said the same thing, that it will be the best game, one of the best games all year against Michigan, and we all remember how that game went down.
Well, I think the big question everybody's asking is who's Justin Fields going to root for in this game. So we'll see. By the way, Alabama coming in at number 5, Tennessee coming in at number 6. So the SEC kind of, SEC's always gotten the benefit of the doubts. Yeah, they end up on the outside looking in with 2 extra teams there that had a chance to get in. We've become so accustomed to, when 2 teams from the same conference get in, it's been the SEC since the playoff iteration has been here. And now the Big Ten gets the benefit of the doubt, and they get 2 teams in. So interesting how that shakes out. You wanted to add something, Jay?
Yeah, why does head-to-head not matter? I am so confused. I remember Tennessee beating Alabama. And I understand the brand recognition, and I think it's stupid. I know brand recognition and the symbol on your helmet rules of sport, but this is stupid. Like, what are we doing where we're in a sport where you have people in a committee room where they're supposed to be different and supposed to put their brains together and not look at brands, but they can't do that. Like, I've not liked the committee for a very long time, even when they were favorable in Ohio State in the very first year of the playoff. But this is dumb. This is really stupid where the head-to-head does not matter. Even if it's 5-6 where the Bulls are going to pick who goes where, this is dumb. Like, I don't understand how this continues in this sport.
I think it's when you lost, right? I mean, it's been 5 weeks since Alabama lost in overtime to LSU. We saw Tennessee just, 3 weeks ago get abolished by South Carolina and Spencer Rattler putting 66 on them. So I think that is what factors worse loss versus close loss and all that. But you're right. I mean, this is why we're moving to an expanded playoff because, a bunch of people sitting in a room debating this kind of stuff. There's always going to be an argument one way or the other. Josh, have something to add?
Yeah, I mean, about like the conference thing is really interesting because look at this top, I guess, 6, 7 now, whatever it's going to be. Because I forgot who 7 was last week, but is Penn State 7? I think they're right there. Right?
Penn State was 8 last week, I believe.
So I'm not sure.
Tennessee was 7.
Tennessee 7. So right now, SEC, Big 10, Big 12 snuck in there. Big 10, SEC, SEC, and then it's going to be another Big 10 team. The gap, it's going to get bigger once the television contracts kick in, but that gap is pretty big as it is right now. And it's a miracle we had an AAC team slip in last year, but I think you're seeing it right now. Like the margin for error for teams from, unless you're like Clemson, but if teams from the ACC, from the Pac-12, from the Big 12, that margin of error, in my opinion, is going to continue to get smaller and smaller. And it's another great year for the big brands because you see all of them really, kind of near up towards the top. So I think it's one thing that we have to track. It's also really good news, kind of sigh of relief that we're going to a, expanded college football playoff, because if we didn't have the AQs, it would be a lot more money than it's already going to the SEC and the Big Ten. They get even more than they're getting right now. So I think that's something that's interesting. Also, shout out to the Big 12 for sneaking your way in there and that group of teams, the kind of the power too right now.
And just to give you the kind of cool thing that the expansion will bring us in the future, had this been this year, and we're waiting on the other teams to be ranked. I guess they're waiting on announcing those. But Michigan and Georgia would both get buys. And TCU and Ohio State will be hosting home playoff games, right? I think I have that right.
Yeah, Kansas State would. I mean, Kansas State would be getting a bye, and probably Clemson would be getting, right. I guess the conversation would be between Clemson, Utah, and Kansas State for the next 2 buys. Yeah, I mean, fascinating. And then I think there'd be a great debate. I mean, between Tulane and Troy. Troy didn't get the respect they deserve, and there'd be a great conversation about, hey, who should be that 6th highest ranked conference champion, which that's great for the sport. That in years in the future, we'll be debating between a Tulane and a Troy about who's more deserving for that spot.
Yeah, the interesting thing is the Power 5 is, or the Group of 5 has been making their case, making their push, and some people are saying maybe Tulane should have been considered. Cincinnati opened that door last year. They got in, they got obliterated. We're done with the Group of 5, is what the committee said. We'd rather a non-Big Ten
teams do against Bama. Gotta give them that. They did about as well as other teams do against Bama.
Yeah. But regardless, at least they put in Ohio State, who we think is at least somewhat deserving. But Daniel, let's jump to you on this as we look ahead. And really, I heard somebody bring this up yesterday, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on it. That Georgia is the new Alabama. You can't deny what Kirby Smart has built there. Top 5 recruiting classes year in and year out. 2 undefeated regular seasons, basically 1 loss in the last 2 seasons. Is Georgia the new Alabama right now?
Yeah, I think Georgia is I think Georgia's the new dynasty. So whatever, if that's what that means, like new Alabama, I think that's what Kirby is establishing. My co-host Clint was on, I think with you at the beginning of the season and said that same thing. And our boy Luke from Locked On Bama kind of laughed at him, kind of shrugged him off. But I mean, I think that's what you're seeing with the way Kirby's recruited and the way that he's built the program and the culture. That's Georgia is not going anywhere. Georgia, I mean, Stetson Bennett is trying to become like the 4th quarterback in college football history to go back-to-back national championships after nobody wanting him, including his own fans early last year. And so he's finding a way to win. He's finding a way to maintain intensity. I think he's the best motivator in college football and the best recruiter in college football. And I think he's hired the right people, specifically Todd Monken at offensive coordinator, to bring this team to where it needs to be. And so, yeah, I mean, you look at the players coming back, and there's obviously questions at offense because you don't know, is Carson Beck going to win the job next year, and what's the quarterback situation going to look like? But the defense for Georgia is going to be better next year than it is this year. And that is almost, we're losing Jalen Carter. That seems crazy, but that's almost an undeniable fact. Like, there are just so many dudes on this Georgia roster that this was going to be a bit of a down year for Georgia after losing everybody to the NFL. And next year was going to be the year that we were kind of bounced back. But I think Kirby just keeps finding ways to keep these kids motivated. And when you've got talent and you've got motivation, then that's all you need. And Georgia showed, I think, against LSU, Georgia's played with it a little bit for the last few weeks against Georgia Tech and Kentucky, Mississippi State, and people have kind of been down on them for that. But I think they've showed last night that when they come out and play their game, that they're a really difficult team to contend with. So, yeah, I know for a fact there aren't any Georgia fans out there who are trying to trade their coach for another one in college football.
Let's get final thoughts, and Daniel, we'll just stick with you real quick. Anything else you want to add as we put a cap on this thing?
No, I'm excited. I mean, I'm excited for the playoff. These are the teams that should be in. I think you could quibble over the seeding, but these are the teams that deserve to be in the playoff. And these are the teams that are in the playoff. And I really believe that Georgia's going to be a favorite over Ohio State, and Michigan's going to be, I think, a pretty big favorite over TCU. But I really think any of these 4 teams can win the national championship. And that is an exciting place.
Josh, final thoughts?
Yeah, really excited for TCU. The first team, guys, from the state of Texas to make the college football playoff, TCU Horned Frogs. It was not Texas A&M. It was not the University of Texas. It was TCU. It's big. It's really important for the Big 12, obviously. This is the first non-Oklahoma team to make the college football playoff. The next step for them, obviously, is to go out and try to be competitive in this game. It's a really bad matchup for them. I think playmaker-wise, they've got just as many guys out there that can make plays as Michigan does. I think the line of scrimmage, like most college football games, is where this one will be decided. Michigan, huge advantage, especially with their defensive line. So Frogs have a tough task ahead of them. They got to make that thing a game. I'm excited to see what Joe Gillespie, what Garrett Riley, what Sonny Dykes all have cooked up for the New Year's Eve game they have.
Okay, final thoughts?
I'm excited. Daniel said it. I'm with Josh and some things about the matchups, but I'm excited about what we're going to be able to witness on New Year's Eve. These 2 games, these 4 teams playing, they should be in. And it doesn't matter who you're playing. You have to show up. From the Ohio State side of things, the last time we saw them play, they didn't show up and bring their A game. Maybe more of a C game. It was really kind of weird to see that game go out. But everybody here, including the Buckeyes, knows you must bring it all for all 4 quarters, all 60 minutes if you want to win the game. Lay it all out there. If you work on getting healthy, work on your scheme, work on trying to find different holes in the opposition's offense or defense, or maybe on special teams, work on it. You have a month to do so. Work on those things, and just be excited that you have this opportunity to play for national championship, but also be prepared for a battle on New Year's Eve in these 2 bowl games for a chance to play for the national championship.
Yeah, and as we wrap up, guys, our friends at BetOnline, they've got the odds to win the playoff. Georgia, the overwhelming favorite there. It looks like you can get some pretty good value on TCU to get in there. So if you link the Horned Frogs and Max Duggan can ride a hot wave, you can get a little good payoff there. But betting on Georgia, there's no money in betting on Georgia, Daniel. So sorry on that front. But, hey, you guys will take another championship. Appreciate you guys for joining us. Of course, we'll have all of our shows throughout the week on Locked On talking about the playoffs and talking about all the other great bowl games, which are going to get announced later this afternoon as well. For Daniel Monroe, Locked On Bulldogs, Josh Neighbors, Locked On Big 12, Jay Stevens, Locked On Buckeyes. I'm Chris Gordy, Locked On SEC. Thank you guys so much for watching, and keep it locked right here to Locked On